All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Grace Corrigan, and I'm the employment specialist at INCIGHT. As you heard, the workshop is being recorded. You're welcome to keep your cameras on, but please keep your microphones muted just to kind of reduce the background noise a bit. And then once the presentation ends, we'll open up for questions. You can also submit your questions in the chat box there, and we'll get to them as soon as possible. So before we start, I'd like to share a little bit about INCIGHT. Our mission is changing hearts and minds, leveraging obstacles, and unlocking potential. We do this through our education and employment programs, which focus on helping individuals with disabilities and barriers. And if you'd like to learn more about our programs, please visit our website, which is www.insight.org, or just give us a call. So jobsnow.org is a component of our employment department. And one way we support job seekers is through these Get Ahead events. They're standalone workshops designed to provide individuals of all abilities with valuable tools and resources for their job search. To explore past workshops focused on essential job seeking skills, you can go to our employment website, which is jobsnow.org. So INCIGHT also hosts in-person job fairs, and our next job fair is on Tuesday, August 19th at the Northwest Natural Building, downtown Portland. Registration is currently open on our website, and I'll also be sending out advertisements with links later this week to all of you. So we'll go ahead and get started. Our workshop this morning is titled AI That Works, Smarter Tools for Your Job Search Journey. And it is a pleasure for me to introduce our presenter today, Matthew Romero, a training and employment counselor with WorkSource in Central Oregon. So welcome, Matthew, and I will now hand the workshop over to you.
Well, thank you, Grace. I'm grateful for everyone for having me. And just for a little bit of background about myself, my name is Matthew Romero, it's still that name, but I do program development and career counseling down in Central Oregon for Central Oregon Intergovernmental Council. And what I'm going to share with you today isn't theory. It's not a bunch of high level stuff. I'm sure a lot of us have been in AI talks before, and it's either gloom and doom or something above our heads. And I say that as a way of introduction because this is stuff that we've been doing for the last 2 years. So it's not theory. This is actual boots on the ground information that I want to share. So I'm going to go ahead and get started because I know we have about half an hour, and then we'll talk. There's always going to be a lot of questions. So let me go ahead and get my screen going here. All right, and if you can just let me know if you see that okay. Thumbs up, no, maybe.
Yes, yes.
Okay, fantastic.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, so this is called AI for the frontline. This was developed for frontline workers, those case managers, the peer support specialists, but it's also works for job seekers as well for the most part. And my goal today is just to cover 3 or 4 different topics. There's a lot more to it. It's just to kind of introduce you and show you some concrete tools. And in the chat, I dropped a link in there. And so I actually created it's about a 50-page manual on how to do all of what I'm going to do. And it's free. I'm not selling anything. And so you can download it. You just have to put $0 once you get in there. And that'll provide a much more robust detail in how to do what I'm talking about. So my story, I work inside prisons. I work inside homeless shelters, and my priority population is are those. It's the priority populations. And so about 3 years ago, we started a program in one of our homeless shelters, and where we were providing in-house career counseling. We were doing resume work, we were doing interview prep, we were teaching career courses, we were doing all these things in the dining hall of one particular shelter. And we hit on something, one of my colleagues and I, and we hit on a massive need in Central Oregon. And before we knew it, we looked like the DMV. We had lines um, almost to the door of people needing desperate service. And, we were looking at most people needed resume work. And historically, that process would take hours per person. And so we knew we had to do it differently. And so there wasn't a shortage of high paid consultants out there who, wanted, we're a little agency, we don't have much money, so we couldn't pay for that. And we couldn't pay for, really expensive software to do the work that we needed to do. So back then we started dabbling, heard about this AI stuff, and began our journey. And I would not have guessed that it would have taken me to speaking to people, but what we've done and the time we've saved without sacrificing quality has absolutely changed the way we provide service to our clients. And that's kind of where I'm coming from for a way of background. Okay. So I already talked about my manual. You can download it for free. It's all good. That'll help. And you're getting real life case examples. You're getting prompt libraries. You're getting all kinds of things. There's also a printable version in there for you. So what do I actually use this for on my day to day when I'm working with people, when I'm doing program development? I'm using it for resumes. I'm doing it for career mapping, which we'll go over. We're using it for cover letters, research. I spend a lot of my time, reading through complex and difficult to read, standards or legislation. And so it's been a really great tool for kind of sifting through that. But we've also been using it for grant writing and research to really good effect. So we're talking about processes that would take, several weeks to write grants and turning it down to a couple of days, things like that. But this is a high overview. We're not going to go through all this. We don't have the time, but this is what we are doing. So this screen right here is kind of like my 6 cardinal rules. I like to put it out front when we're dealing with AI, especially when we're dealing with AI with clients. So, and again, this goes for job seekers as well, but the number one thing for us on our end and our agency is always protecting clients' private or personal information. We never put in personal information ever, not names, certainly not social security numbers or any type of identifying information. The second big point when using ChatGPT or Copilot or any of these other programs is that AI sounds confident and it's also confidently wrong, which can be really deceiving sometimes. And some of you have probably played with that. And I like to talk about it like it's a puppy that really wants to please its owner. And, oftentimes will tell you exactly what you want to hear. But with a little bit of experience, you'll be able to work around that. So we always say double check the names, stats, just check everything. That's a big component about what we do. The third big point for us on our end is we never submit anything without human editing. That's the big difference between what we do and what you may have seen people do haphazardly. There's always a human component to what we do. AI is a tool. It does not do everything, and it's not. It does some things really well, and it does things really poorly. So that's why the human touch is really critical. AI, don't skip the context. If you're vague, it will be vague. If it's generic, it will be generic. Always include who it's for. The more details you can provide, the better outcome you will have. And then point 5, don't expect one prompt to do it all. To do quality work is going to take several iterations of prompting to get to a result that you want. And then the last one is don't use AI to make decisions about people. ChatGPT is a writing and research assistant and not a hiring tool. It speeds up tasks, but not to judge someone's readiness, ability, or worth. And then the last thing on here, you'll see a picture of a hammer. And I like to talk about this because it's like the analogy that if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And it's really common for people new to using, chat GPTs to try and use it for everything. Um, it does not do everything, far from it, but it does some things very well. So there's two versions that are worth mentioning. There's a free version that most people use. You What you can't do with the free version is you can't upload files. It can't handle complex queries, and it often gives shallow and incomplete answers. There's data limits on how often you can use the free version, um, and it takes more time to edit. So for us in our organization, we use the $19 a month version, and you get a return on that investment pretty quickly if you do. And no, I do not work for them. I've tried; they won't let me. Um, but with ChatGPT Pro, you can do complex things. You can drag and drop files in there for examination. It speeds up the workflow considerably. It has a much better vocabulary to pull from. Um, and actually, yesterday there was a massive upgrade to the paid version where you can do called Agent, which now you can actually create um, presentation straight to PowerPoint. And it also includes a component called Deep Research, which used to cost $200 a month, but now they're incorporating it into this version that does really complex research, which is worth investigating. So let me get that out of the way. So what do I do when I'm using this with, clients or as a job seeker? So kind of like my flow for using this is just it's 5 steps. And this is kind of the foundation of everything I do when I'm utilizing it. So, I talk about intake, that's gathering information from, whether it's a client meeting or whatever it is. The more information I have, the better. Prompting is just the term that we use for giving it a command. That's all that is if someone's new to this. And then the last 3 steps always involve editing, reviewing with the clients, and finalizing. So, there's only, one or two pieces of this that actually have to do with AI. And then I spend a considerable amount of time doing the human touch, and it makes a world of difference in the quality and the output that you give to your clients or to yourself. You can spot when, a resume is just um, AI made. It's got quirky characteristics, and you can always point it out. That's not what we're trying to do here. And just a quick snapshot, if for those, this may be brand new, but this is kind of what we're looking at for the user interface. On the bottom with the pink arrows, that's what we talk about when we're saying you give it a prompt. That's where you put it. And again, this is pretty basic level. Um, but I want to take a moment to talk about prompting quality. This is an interesting piece for me, and I used an example of a welder. And I gave the example of a basic prompt versus a decent prompt versus an exceptional prompt. And so we start off with something as simple as, create a resume bullet point for a welder, and it'll make a generic one. So you can see that on the right hand with the red, and use welding tools to build and repair metal parts and equipment. Pretty basic. We can do a little better. So you can say something like create a resume bullet point for an expert welder, 10 years of experience, lead with a strong action verb, give it a little more direction. You get a little better response. So fabricated and welded structural components with precision and consistency, etc. It's starting to get better, right? But you can also do things like what I call like a pro prompt. So same example, but create a resume bullet point for an expert welder with 10 years of experience who worked here. You can actually drop in the website of where they worked. So it'll actually scrub that website and really dial it in. It's a really great tool. So then you get an outcome that's terrific. You know, and you can read through that, but it's a pretty significant difference from the not great prompt to the pro prompt. So that's why I like to show this slide and why prompting matters so much. So if we get into resumes, because this is the bulk of what I do, I probably do 6 to 10 resumes a week for my clients. It's in our region, it's it's the biggest need we have. It's the especially we have a lot of layoffs going right now, economic uncertainty. People are coming through our door, and this process used to take 2 to 3 hours, sometimes more, depending on the complexity of the resume. Um, I can have a draft to a client, and usually with about 30 minutes to 45 minutes of work, depending on how hard it is. Sometimes it could be a little bit faster. But again, like the flow that I talked about, and again, you can use this if you're working on your own resume, is, I do the client intake, I get all my information, all my notes, again, with no personal information. I use ChatGPT to generate a resume bullet points, for each job, just like what I showed you. I'm building the resume in pieces. I'm not asking it to build a resume in its entirety. That will not generate something decent. So I'll build the resume bullet points. I'll ask ChatGPT to create a professional summary if that's, your style for, how you like to do it. And then I'll use it to extract hard skills and soft skills. A lot of my resumes are going to be the hybrid combination style of resume. So, I can drop the work I've done and say, hey, out of everything you've seen here, you know, give me a list of 10 hard skills and rank them, by importance related to a specific job. And then you spend the time revising and editing, with your client. This is kind of my process for working. Um, and these are just a couple of the example prompts. These are all in the manual. Create resume bullet points for someone with X years of experience. Use an assertive professional tone. Includes industry specific language. You want to tell exactly the product that you want it to make. So I get a lot of stuff like this. You know, not great resumes. So we use the same process for revisions, but we can take something like this and punch it up into something like this, which is a significant difference. I can do that relatively quickly, and get that resume in hand to my client so they can get back to work or start applying for a job. It's significant. So cover letters are kind of the same way. Um, there's a debate going on, on LinkedIn and other places, that some people will argue that cover letters are archaic. We just don't need them anymore. I am not in that camp. So I work with heavily barriered clients, and cover letters are the way for them to tell their story, to reclaim a narrative, address major barriers, show accountability and growth, and it's a way for them to stand out. So, on my tombstone, it will say, I fought for cover letters till the day I die. So, and I've seen them work wonders. And I like to talk about cover letters because ChatGPT or whatever you're using can help kind of hone that story, especially, for someone who's coming out of prison, or whatever it is. It's a, it's a great way to address the red flag or whatever it is they're concerned about right out the gate, and do it in a relatively quick time. And so how does it actually look? So by this point, maybe I have a resume, I have meeting notes, and I literally just upload those files into ChatGPT and use those as a reference to build what I need to build. And that's the big difference between a free version and, a $19 a month version. It's also worth mentioning that, again, like, protecting personal information is the #1 priority for us. And you can do these things thoughtfully to address barriers, but only and only when someone shares this with you. We do not ask for, um, their story. It's something shared. So that's always a good reminder for us who are working in like social services. Again, some of these prompts, this is in the manual, but like, write a reentry cover letter for this resume, and and apply to this specific job. So you can actually upload the resume, you can upload the job description, and say something like, briefly acknowledge the employment gap in a positive, non-defensive way. emphasize the applicant's renewed commitment, transferable skills, recent trainings, and readiness to work, and enthusiasm for contributing to a new team. Keep the tone confident, respectful, and forward-looking. I like to use these examples because you can actually give it pretty specific prompts on what you want to do. And so this will create the foundation, that we can work with to build something meaningful. So I know I'm kind of skipping through this because we don't have a ton of time, but again, in the manual, it goes into this in much more detail. But we can, create a very decent looking cover letter, and that's also AI proof. So I have a section in there on how to deal with AI screening software. So, but that's an interesting point. I get a lot of pushback in HR. They do not like this stuff. I get it. However, for people who struggle writing, this is a game changer. So
So I do have a quick question
please,
about
yeah,
cover letters. In the past, this job seeker said that they have attended WorkSource workshops, and in the workshop told that cover letters are not as important as before, and some companies mention that those are optional. Do you suggest that job seekers still include them regardless?
I do. Yeah, I'm like I said,
Oh,
that'll be on my tombstone. This is there's still ways. It's the way to stand out still. Um, and I get a lot. There's a lot of HR people who still appreciate this. And if you have two equal candidates applying, and one's got a decent cover letter and one doesn't, you know, that's I'm gonna next step that one. So
I think
you
I
know.
agree with you, Matthew.
Yeah. It's an interesting point. Everyone knows in my office not to mess with me in cover letters. So um, the other really interesting thing that you can do with ChatGPT is interview prep. So you can download the app and you can actually use what's called voice mode to practice on yourself. Um, so you can ask it to do, and it's pretty straightforward on how to do it, but you can do things like some of the prompts like based on this job description, and you can drop it in. Conduct a mock interview with me. Ask behavioral questions using the STAR method. You make it a medium difficulty interview with 8 to 10 questions. Ask one at a time and wait for my response before continuing. Be professional but supportive. You don't want it to be too mean to you, but job seekers can actually practice this on their own if you don't have the ability to practice one-on-one, with someone like in our office. But you can also use it to prepare relevant and appropriate questions for an upcoming interview. So, can you generate 10 targeted interview questions for this specific job that I have coming up? Include a mix of traditional and behavioral questions, again, like I did before. But I use this for my clients all the time to do mock interviews, and it's hyper tailored and pretty effective, which is nice. Um, So this big one here, this is probably, no, I'm going to say this is the most important thing that I do using this technology with my clients is how to use it for career mapping. Um, it's, I mean, I do this with my refugee clients, it's, as I put here, it's ethical and effective when it supports, not replaces the client's voice and lived experience. It helps identify transferable skills, surface gaps relevant to the U.S. job market, and explore career paths aligned with your goals. So the supporting material that I use to help create a map or a guide or help, you can use it for a gap analysis or skills analysis, see where you're weak. You can use your meeting notes, you can use the resume, you can use any other supporting document, again, with personal PI removed, to create a pretty in-depth report for someone to show them. So you can do things like, let's see, we'll use, which example can I use? Like like we deal with a lot of people who are chronically unemployed due, to health, you know. So review this client's resume, notes, and background. They've been out of work for a long time due to X, Y, and Z. Create a career assessment, including transferable skills, low barrier jobs with growth potential, short-term or flexible roles that are local or remote. and access and accessible training options, maybe under 6 months or faster. Also include cost, formatting, and timelines. Note key barriers. Suggest milestones. You can ask a really complex thing to generate a pretty in-depth report. And a lot of it is just meant to facilitate discussion. I often use it to ask things like, find non-traditional career paths for someone. Helps me think outside of the box and see what's out there, or what aligns best with, what we're seeing here. And you can, for job seekers, this is a great way to try this on yourself, to help identify career paths, or if you want to get to point B, what do I need to do to get there? What educational options are out there? Like, here's my limitation. I don't want to go to a 4-year school, or you can really go crazy on these. And I have never had a client who's just been like, this is off. This is not me. Like, this is a waste of my time. Um, I used to do this by hand, and there's a human touch component to this still, but this process historically would take many, many hours to put together, this level of career assessment. So that's just something to think about, to use for yourself, or you're working with a client. It's pretty cool. So the other thing I want to show you, um, is how do we use this for job searching? And this is a relatively new avenue that I've been using it for clients. But with the paid version, you can actually pull job openings from multiple sites at once, and find hidden jobs on niche boards. And it's great for filtering spam postings, which is unfortunately becoming much more prevalent in, some of the more popular sites that we see, like LinkedIn and Indeed. Um, it can, compile specialized sites for for fields like nonprofits, remote work, or government and technology. But it can also identify local employers who maybe are, fast tracking people right now. Yeah, I think I see a
Yep,
hand.
Clarissa, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Yeah, I tried using ChatGPT the other day to job search. Like, I fed it my resume and then I told it, find me jobs that match my qualifications. But the problem was, when it spit back to me were jobs that were already closed or expired. And so I just had to go back to
Interesting.
the job boards to
Okay.
do it that way.
May I ask which version you're using?
I'm using the free version. I can't afford to pay big
Yeah.
bucks for all these types of things. I'm unemployed.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah, I think that's one of the benefits of the paid version is it's able to do that, but the free is not, unfortunately.
So if I did the paid version of $19 a month, it wouldn't have this problem of just giving me closed jobs. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, it's not perfect, but it does pretty decent work. Yeah, and I was actually doing this with someone yesterday. Um, yeah, but unfortunately, yeah, with the free version, you cannot. Um, Good question though. And kind of like the last point on these is, one of the limitations with this is it cannot, pull from private paywalls, or paywalls, and it can't link directly to LinkedIn, or it can't auto apply, which is a question I get often. Um, so one of kind of like one of the final, we got a few more things to talk about, but it's like you don't have to do everything at once if this is brand new to you. I always encourage people to start small. Like in my team, it took quite a while for adoption, to kind of percolate like through our organization. This is just a tool. Okay, it's not like you're the one in charge. You're the one making the judgment calls. I always say, don't aim for perfection, but aim for momentum. Always personalize it. Um, and you don't have to know everything. You just have to know how to ask and how to start. So what happens with, there's a lot of people on this this meeting who, work with, frontline people or work on teams. And so I just have a couple of slides I want to just talk about. I'm sure a lot of people have a lot of questions about these kind of things, but like pushback is going to happen once you start doing. Some of you may have already seen it. Um, there may be significant pushback to using AI. I know in Workforce or WorkSource, for example, like they're not supposed to be using it right now. And it's like this like back alley deal. So people will come to me in like the shadow of the night and be like, hey, can you show me how to use, this and that? And in my agency, we're allowed to, but we have clients coming in the door asking about these types of things who know more about it than, some of our staff. But so what do you say to that? Like one of the biggest questions I get pretty often, I'd say it's probably the number one issue is AI going to replace our jobs or reduce staff? I don't think so. My philosophy is I think it supports staff. It doesn't replace them. It definitely reduces burnout by handling repetitive and writing tasks like case notes and resumes and all these things. Um, it's a tool, and I think it's going to become so ubiquitous. It's going to be like us being familiar with like Microsoft Word or Excel. It's just going to be at some point. It's going to be expected that you know how to use this, and if you don't, that could be a detriment to wherever you're going to work if you need to use it. So the other big thing, well, the output sounds AI made. It sounds robotic. Sounds inauthentic. And that's why I'm really harping on the human component to this. Why it's so critical. We use AI for the first draft and then personalize the final product, the result. Um, Decent outputs that still reflect the client's voice and our standards. So this journey for me to use this stuff, um, I wouldn't have gone down it if I had to sacrifice quality for what I create and to work with people with. Um, if I always ask the question, is this final product something that you would have arrived to on your own, even though it would have taken you a while? And if the answer is yes, then that's probably a good thing. So the other big question I get, what about your data? This is actually a really important one. We talked about we never enter PI. We certainly don't enter personal information, sensitive client details. Um, there's also something called private mode in ChatGPT and others, where it will not send your chats. They will not be used to be studied or to be learned from on a bigger scale. In addition to that, we use a pretty secure VPN to protect our information. So there's multiple layers of data protection. So the big one is, will leadership approve of this? um, I I feel like some will once they start seeing the return on investment. Time savings are significant. Resumes in little as 15 minutes, but sometimes more depending on how complex. Grant writing is a huge one for our organization. That was kind of like a watershed moment. We had a big grant that got overlooked and would have taken probably about a month and a half to write, and we were able to do it within a couple of days and win it. And so that's when leadership was, at least for us, started really noticing, wow, there's really something here. And then they start seeing the return on your time in a significant way with day-to-day tasks. So hopefully they'll come around. And the other big one I always get is, I'm not tech savvy. You don't have to be. And if you can write an email, you can use this stuff. It just start practicing. It's really not complicated. If you can text, if you can email, congratulations. You can use AI. So estimated time savings for myself, I save on an average of about 8 hours a week, sometimes significantly more, depending on the project I'm working on. Um, I just want to spend more time with my clients, and I don't want to be bogged down in paperwork. Um, it has reduced burnout for our team, and for that reason alone, I feel this is worth learning and teaching, our organization and others on how to do it as well. So, okay, we're right at 30 minutes, which is good. That's what we wanted. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions. I'm happy to answer them. This was kind of like a rough, introduction to what you can do. But as a job seeker, like you should be using some of this stuff, but using it ethically, using it responsibly, and not just cookie cutter copying and pasting. That's probably the most common mistake that people make, and it shows when you do. So
we do have a couple questions already in
okay.
chat, so we'll go through them first. Anne is asking, when you apply for jobs, how can we contact you to work on our resumes?
Oh,
Are
how to
you
contact me?
available?
Oh, to contact me directly?
Yeah.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I can drop my email in the chat if you'd like. Hold on. I'll send you my work email, and I'd be happy to have that discussion and see where I might be able to give you a hand.
Awesome.
I like to joke I'm the only person in the state that enjoys doing resumes. It's weird. Yeah, there may be someone else out there too, but not many of us.
And then Cynthia was asking if you could give an example of a career map you created, or perhaps you don't have permission to do so.
I do actually. If you give me just a moment, I can bring one up.
And then she also asked, do you know if there's a possible way for like to have a free or a brief time on the paid version just to see, do they have like a free option, or you don't know that?
That I'm not sure about. Yeah, I don't know if they just have a trial version. I don't believe they do.
Okay.
So it's going to take me just a second. I have, trying to think of one that I can use. Yeah, I might have to get back to you on that as I'm searching for it.
Okay. So another question, have you heard any feedback from employers in regards to feeling frustrated because job seekers are using this resource to create their resume and cover letters? Some can tell AI was used. It may be considered cheating, shortcut, and that the
Yeah.
job seeker doesn't want to do the work. Any thoughts on that?
Oh, I have thoughts on that. Absolutely. Um, I like to think of it this way. In the past, if I struggled with a resume, what would we do? We would hire someone. We would pay someone to do this work, right? And it's not cheap. I don't feel that this is different than hiring, a personal or professional resume writer. It's kind of evens the playing field a bit, and I imagine that's frustrating for HR because it is making their job more difficult. Um, People who struggle writing, especially a lot of my clients, they cannot. I want to say they can't, but they struggle deeply with writing, and to be able to help them and again level the playing field is terrific. However, like I mentioned several times, the difference is you can do this well or you can do this poorly. And that's why I'm really emphasizing the human touch on this. And even in the manual, I talk about um, ways to, you can AI proof this stuff. You can change the tone, you can change um, all kinds of things to make it still you. And that's the difference. And that's, when I submit a resume to someone, it is their voice. Um, and it's great to share. But yeah, I don't think it's fair to penalize people for using this when they're using it correctly. To me, it's no different than using a professional resume writer.
Not too long ago, a job seeker had told me, they had these jobs, like say 20 years ago, and they couldn't really remember what they did. And I said, well, why don't you just ask Chat GP what are some of the duties for this job position? And then when they looked at it, they went, oh, I did that, and oh, I did that. And so It was just something to kind of help them and, provoke them into deeper thought about actually what skills that they utilized during that job. Okay, so the next question, have you worked with any interview chat box? And if so, what are your favorite ones?
I'll give you just a moment. Sorry, what was the question again?
Okay, have you worked with any interview chat bots?
I don't have much experience working with those directly. Yeah.
Okay,
Oh, and I do have a career map example
cool. Do you
that
want to just share your screen again?
yeah, and this is one I use with PI taken out. Um, it's worth seeing, and hold on. Okay, here we go. Let me know if you can see this Word doc.
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, so this was for a unique client who, had a BA in neuropsychology and is brilliant, went to, some top tier schools and had to flee for a pretty serious situation and had to restart somewhere. And so I gave my background and objectives. So it's understanding like this is what we're trying to do. She's now in a stable environment here. Her goal is to re-enter the biotech industry in an entry-level training capacity, drawing upon their academic foundation and previous research experience. So this is a cool one. And so, we started off like, here's what she has. Here's what we're working with. Here's her strengths. And then we get into, here's what we're looking at. Here's the challenges and barriers that we're looking at right now. We're looking at a big employment gap. She hasn't worked since she's gotten out of college because of what happened. She lost her industry references. The industry has changed since she's been out of school. So this is what we're looking at. And we're also dealing with like a really competitive market. So what do we do? Okay, so that's like, the base that we're starting with. So how do we target employers and opportunities? And this was in Central Oregon. So how do we prioritize, non-traditional candidates? We can through on-the-job trainings, uh, through reentry initiatives. There's ways we can do this. So I was able to create a list of actual biotech companies that we live that are near us, with how to apply, a little blurb about each one and on why it might fit. And there's quite a few. So that was like how we're starting, which is great. So we're kind of giving her a roadmap. And then we get into there's national reentry programs for this client, oh my gosh, there's Path Forward, there's internships and returnships through Pfizer, through different biotech companies where you're able to identify. There's, remote opportunities, Amazon is, I was able to provide like a pretty decent list of this is like where we can go with where you're at and what we're looking at. Johnson & Johnson had, a number of opportunities for returnships, including mentorship and direct passive employment roles for exactly situations like this. Terrific. And then it goes on. And then we get into, resume and strategy tips on how to redo it. And that's what we did with this client. We totally redid all of our resumes. We did everything. And, then there's also a component on how do we talk about what you went through to employers. How do we tell that story without delving into the personal? How do we turn it into the story of resilience, which it was? And then we get into like short-term networking strategies, how to use, LinkedIn. It's pretty in depth. And this was, there's other programs for women who've been through what she's been through, and then we end with like a timeline of what we can do together. So this was, again, there's a human component to this, but there's a lot of resources that we were able to find that I don't think I would have found on my own. But that was one career map. We have a short term, long term, and then, kind of we go from there. So these vary depending on the situation. But that was an example of what, helping someone get back on track after being derailed in their career. Sorry. Yeah.
Okay, Tammy, your hand's been raised for a while, so do you want
Thank
to
you.
unmute
Yeah.
and ask your question?
Hi. Yeah. So I had a professionally done resume, and it was to a specific field and a particular job. We did a cover letter, everything. I didn't get the job, no matter how great the resume looked. I still didn't even get an interview with it. So it what I was going to ask is, can I take, and I think I can take my resume and then use Chat GPT using some of my information already and then tweak it? Or does Chat GPT just kind of come in and just look over the whole thing and go, nope, nope, this is more whatever, and kind of rewrite it?
Yeah, you can absolutely do that. And if you have, that copy that you you paid for, um,
Mhm.
you can say something like, you don't have to do a full rewrite if you don't want to, but you can fix sections or take, a group of bullet points and say, hey, take these and let's rewrite them to optimize them towards this. Like the content's still there, but it's just going to change the verbiage to, it'll do keywords, it'll do all those things, but that's how I would do it, kind of like piece by piece. I wouldn't say, hey, redo this entire resume. It's a good resume. You want to keep it. You want to keep all the components, but just change your professional summary, change your bullet points. But yeah, absolutely. That's a perfect example.
Okay, so because I use Copilot,
Yeah, that's fine too.
and I will take out certain sentences and have it geared toward make this a more sales oriented sort of uh, resume using the information that you see, kind of thing. Is
You're
that
on track. You're doing
okay?
it.
Okay, Christopher was asking what's the best AI? I know you're focusing on Chat GPT, but I guess just kind of wondering, do you have any thoughts of other programs out
Yeah.
there?
Yeah. Obviously, like I use ChatGPT, and there are advantages to that one over some of the competition. But others that I use and have used are like Gemini, are really good. Gemini is totally fine. Um, there's, Copilot, which is great. I usually, most of my folks, pop around and there's several other out there, but my recommendation would also be to use Gemini. They have really good data usages for the free version. You can use the same prompts. Everything in that manual, you can still use it for other yeah.
Okay, so Jerome has a question here. Coming out of the military, we tend to move to different units. How do I simplify and create a resume that speaks civilian and not so much military?
Yeah, it's the same process that it was Tammy, right? That was asking about her resume earlier. Same process. So, you take that section of your resume, those bullet points from, and just ask it to maybe something like this. Say, it's like what you just said. Hey, I just recently, left the military and I'm having a hard time translating, my resume into civilian language. Can you do that? Can you just ask it to change the jargon to make it how do I say it? I'm trying to think of a good way to say this. You can simply ask it to make it sound uh, the language of, non-civilian
You would
workforce.
say more professional.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
All right, Diana, you've had your hand up there. Would you like to unmute?
Sure. Can you hear me?
I
Yep.
can. Yeah.
Um, I want to make sure, sorry if you mentioned this before, but I think you alluded that you have some tools that you can utilize to make your resume not detectable by
Great.
scanners for using
Yep.
ChatGPT. And did you already share those
I
tools or?
didn't share those tools. They're in the manual
Okay.
multiple times, but it's something as simple as this. And if you're concerned that your resume is going to be, and this tends to be more on like the white collar side of things, but if you're concerned that, it's going to be gone through a resume screener or ATS software that may be dinging you for using I simply ask it to rewrite the content to avoid AI detectability. It sounds crazy, but it'll actually rewrite it. And there's all kinds of patterns that AI generates that we don't notice, but software will. So it'll screen it, it'll rewrite it, and I've tested it several times. So I'll rewrite it, avoid AI to software, and run it through screeners, and it's fine. Doesn't
You know,
even show up.
you
So
know, that's good advice because we have a joke here at work about how many emails get sent through AI.
oh yeah, goodness.
And you start wondering, you know, how much of it is real. And so you want employers to really think that your skills are real. And that is the fear with becoming too reliant upon it making you sound real, because we use Simplicity through
Hmm,
I work at
nice.
Portland Community College, and we have some sort of monitors that can tell if people have used Chat GPT, and there's discussion about, oh, what should we do about the resumes that we are screening that are all Chat GPT? And
Yeah,
so it's
it's
all new. We're trying to figure it out.
definitely. It's like that hammer metaphor I used in the beginning. And I get annoyed when people send me short emails that I know are AI written. I'm just like, come on, like that's a little ridiculous in my opinion. But I hear you.
So Tammy was asking about the Gemini OS, and was it specific? And I'm not too sure what you're asking, Tammy.
Oh, sorry. Let me see.
Specific to what?
The operating system, like, is it Apple or is it Android or I mean
Which
iPhone or
one?
Gemini?
Oh, that's Google.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Carolyn says, is there a method to use these resources for formatting within a document? I work with individuals with vision loss, and formatting is a big barrier to
Yeah.
producing professional resumes.
Yeah. So my process is, so I have, a pretty good library of templates that I like. And so what so I'm obviously moving the results into my template, and that's where I go to edit from there. ChatGPT or Gemini, any of these, they can't create formatted um, resumes or documents. They can create really crude Word documents and stuff, but they can't create like a finished product, if that makes sense. Um, so that may still be an issue and require help, but it's a content generator.
All right, we have another question. What advice would you give to students graduating from school, college when using ChatGPT for job search? And this job seeker is currently using the free version.
Yeah, I mean, if you're entering the workforce, I would emphasize, I'd probably go down that route a little bit, writing like a first, professional job focus, like cover letter, highlighting um, like transferable skills from college. So it would definitely be, I'd recommend like a hybrid type of resume that's skills focused mostly, because your work history is going to be limited. Um, that's probably the route I would go down, but you can use it for job searching, and you can ask it for tips like, hey, I'm just graduated college. I haven't had, I'm just entering the workforce. What do you recommend? Give me some job search strategies. What am I looking at? Um, and then the manual gets into this more in terms of research, but you can do like labor market research, for what you're getting into, and some really cool things like that that I didn't have time to get into today.
We have a comment. I heard that scanners can get false positives and say a thing is written by AI when it's not. Have you ever heard of that?
I have heard of that, and I mean, it's like the Roadrunner and Coyote trying to catch each other, you know, and again, like I've used the joke about what's on my tombstone, but I think what will also be on there is I don't think people using this responsibly and ethically should be penalized.
And then Tammy says if a resume has some AI, but not all, do the screenings show that the resume is AI generated? So if it's just a
Um,
function.
some of the software will show you like what percentage of it is generated, but I don't think it's like a pass fail type of thing. But like I said, there's ways to get around this pretty easily.
Anyone else have a question or comment that they'd like to share before we close today? One of my thoughts is just, I've been using it for a while now, a couple of months, and the more I understand about, how you can dig deeper, like you get an answer, but like, no, that's not quite right. And you can change it and tweak it. And, it's almost like I got this really smart friend of mine now, and I can just ask him any questions I want. And so, and I do understand that it has to be personal, right? Whatever I'm writing. But I do find it very helpful.
Yeah, and you can download the manual and the link I just dropped in, and when you go get it, just know that you have to put $0 to download it. It is free. I'm not selling anything, but a lot of what I talked about goes into significantly more detail, and it's more like workflows on how to do a step-by-step, which it should help. So, and your friend ChatGPT sometimes can lie to you. So just know that, with experience, you'll learn it's like nuances, and you'll find it funny at times. At least I do. So.
And with human friends too, sometimes they make mistakes or they answer a question that they really don't know the answer to,
Yeah,
but they want to help you. So
it's a tool,
yes,
and don't, if you're using it for everything, you're probably, back off a little bit, but just practice some small things first. It's a skill set you'll learn, you'll get better with.
absolutely. All right. Well, this has been great. Thank you so much, Matthew, for sharing your expertise. And I know I'm sure everybody here has gained some insights and knowledge on using AI going forward and being wise with it. And I thank you, everybody who's joined us today. It's been a great turnout, and I just hope you all have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, you're welcome. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Grace, and nice meeting you all. And if you need
Yes,
anything else,
you
let me
too.
know.
Thank
Happy to
you
help.
so much.
Okay.